I wanted to welcome you to our museum and to Timewinder Tales 2024. We're really happy to have you here. We're all going to learn some history tonight. We will enjoy being gathered as a community, and I think you'll be really entertained. So I'm excited to have you here. My name is Erica Roulier. I'm the chair of the museum board, which is the Hood River County Heritage Council. So we're the nonprofit board that manages this history museum. So I've been volunteering at this museum for 4 years, and this program is definitely my favorite. So Timewinder Tales used to be known as Cemetery Tales, and probably a lot of you saw Cemetery Tales in the cemetery, which was great. But it's evolved a bit to Timewinder Tales now here in the museum. I would just say that the talents of our researchers, writers, and actors is just so impressive because it brings history to life and it makes us feel connected to people who used to live here in the past. And for me, the best moments are when actors or family members of the people being portrayed really feel that connection or feel the gratitude that those stories are being told. So I hope that you all feel a bit of that magic tonight as well. I think that's what it's all about. But before we get started, I wanted to say a few thank yous. To start off with, I wanted to thank our sponsors, both business and individual sponsors. They are all listed in your program, so please take a look. But I wanted to give a special shout out to Jean Harmon, Pat Evenson Brady, and Steph Lending, who's here tonight. So a quick note about Steph. It was actually his vision for a centennial celebration of the Butler Bank Building that helped us land on this year's theme, which is 1924, a snapshot of life 100 years ago. So Steph organized an amazing celebration at the Butler Bank Building on September 6th. And so 1924 is when that bank building was built, as well as the Hood River Bridge opened that same year. You'll hear all more about that. But Steph was the one who proposed 2 of the characters who are associated with the Butler Bank Building, and so you'll be meeting them tonight. A huge thank you to our tireless writer, producer, director, Michael Friend. So he's put in many hours researching these characters, writing the script, collecting the historic photos that you'll get to enjoy tonight. So I feel a lot of gratitude for Michael, and I think you will too by the end of the show. I also want to thank our 5 really talented actors. They've really committed themselves to portraying these people with accuracy and sensitivity. 3 of the actors are veteran Cemetery Tales actors, and 2 of them are new this year to the museum, so we're really happy to have them. Thank you also to John Hardum for doing our lighting and recording the show tonight so we can have a video version to show to students or other people who couldn't be here in person. So that's wonderful. I also want to thank our volunteers, those who are here tonight helping out, and all the other museum volunteers who are working behind the scenes and just helping to keep this museum running, including our board members. A couple more thank yous. Thank you to those who are museum members. Could I have just a quick show of hands? Who is a member of the museum? Thank you. We love you. If you're not already a member, please consider joining the museum to support us. And as an added bonus, coming up in 2 weeks, on Thursday, October 3rd, we're having a special event just for members. So it's a reception to celebrate the opening of our new temporary exhibit. It's called A New Avenue, Historic Photos of the Hood River Bridge. So that'll be opening in October and run through December. But if you can't join us and be here on October 3rd, definitely mark your calendars for October 6th. So there's information in your program, but this is a really special event. It's a community bridge centennial celebration that we're doing in conjunction with the Port of Hood River and Visit Hood River. Across from the museum on the Marina Green, there will be vendors, speakers, historic cars from Wham. And as a really special treat, this is the one opportunity to walk across the bridge if you want to. So it'll be open from 10 a.m. to noon to walk across the Hood River Bridge. You just need to register ahead online at the port's website. So definitely check that out. I know I will be out there walking across the bridge. The other exciting thing that day, on that Sunday, the museum will be open, special hours, and we'll be serving birthday cake to celebrate the 100-year birthday of the bridge. So around noon, we'll be cutting the cake. So please join us on October 6th. Okay, I think that's it. Now I would like to start the show by introducing our executive director, Lisa Commander.
Thanks, Erica. Good evening to all of you and welcome. It's so great to have all of you here, and what a fabulous evening it's going to be. So off we go. The year is 1924. The first Winter Olympics take place in Chamonix, France. President Calvin Coolidge would be elected in November to his first term as U.S. President. Take note, that's a trivia answer. So, Rhapsody in Blue by George Gershwin is performed for the first time in New York City. The International Business Machines Company, also known as IBM, is founded in New York State, and American media company Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer is formed in California. On May 26th of that year, the Asian Exclusion Act is passed, banning all Asian immigration to the United States. This ban occurred in spite of Japan's status as a principal ally to the U.S. in World War I. And this ban contributed to their alliance with Germany in World War II. But in other news that year, the Washington Senators beat the New York Giants 4-3 in the World Series. So this evening, you will meet people who made an impact on Hood River during this year, this very eventful year. With the exception of Albert Ernest Doyle, they all lived here in Hood River. These individuals were all connected in some manner. Leslie Butler and A.E. Doyle, because of the bank with Butler's name on it. Butler was also connected to everybody else here this evening because of his bank, but also because of the projects in which they and their spouses were involved. The Butlers and the Yasuis were first connected when Masuo Yasui worked nights at Butler's Bank as a janitor. Shitsuo Yasui, Masuo's wife, influenced Hood River society through her husband and the subsequent lives of her 8 children. Ola Stryker Bell and her husband Charlie were proprietors of the Mount Hood Hotel. And like Leslie Butler, Charlie advocated for cars and highways. They all wanted to move about. He believed the newly built Columbia River Highway would bring business to his doorstep, and eventually it did. And that brings us to the inimitable Pansy DeWitt. She was a great observer of Hood River life and documented it in her bountiful scrapbooks. She was born into the well-known and respected Baker family. She married Harry DeWitt, who brought Ford cars to the valley. Pansy will be our host this evening and introduce each of the other guests from 1924. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge our connections with this land and its people. Land acknowledgement is a traditional custom that dates back millennia in many Native American communities. The Columbia River Gorge in which we live rests on the traditional and ancestral village sites of the Confederated Tribes and Bands of the Yakima Nation, the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, the original people of the Columbia River, the Umatilla, Celilo Wyam, and the many other tribes who have made their homes along the Columbia River. We thank the descendants of these tribes for being the original stewards and protectors of these lands, and acknowledge the many wrongs that we have done to them, and celebrate their resilience and their perseverance. We are honored to be guests here. And now, I'd like you to welcome Ms. Pansy DeWitt.
Well, my given name is Georgiana Florence, but everyone knows me as Pansy. Hello. My husband is Harry DeWitt, one of the automobile men in town. I was born in Portland, January 17, 1885, to William J. Baker in Florence, Alfred. But the family moved to Hood River the following year Father planted the very first commercial Newtown apple orchard in town. He was an early developer of the North Pacific fruit industry and an organizer of the Hood River Apple Growers Union. His fruit won first place at the Chicago World's Fair, and again in 1901 at the Pan American Exhibition in Buffalo, New York. Well, despite these successes, or perhaps because of them, Father sold the farm in 1904. He became involved in real estate and insurance, mainly working with orchardists, buying and selling land. He also had more time to give to his community, which was very important to him. He served on Hood River City Council and the school board. His interest in education is deep and abiding. He taught us, my 4 siblings and I, that a nation's greatness depends in large measure upon the education of its children. The same year Father sold the farm is when my Harry came to town. He worked as assistant bookkeeper for Davenport Brothers Lumber Company, which is probably where we met, though frankly, it didn't stick in my head. Well, clearly he made an impression. We were married the following year, September 1905. We had a lovely small gathering at my parents' home. At that time, they were at State Street and Park Avenue. Right after the celebration, Harry and I jumped on the afternoon train and headed west to start our married life in Inglis, Oregon. That's near Clatskanie. Harry had a responsible position with the Oregon Lumber Company. We didn't stay long. We got back to Hood River within a few years. Harry tried his hand at real estate before firmly landing in the driver's seat, so to speak, in the up-and-coming world of automobiles. He was also a co-owner of the Hood River Box Factory, makers of Apple shipping boxes, and as a side business, he distributed Orchard brand spray materials. You know, come to think of it, orchardists would have had a very difficult time doing business without the Bakers and the DeWitts. I am a happy homemaker and hostess, and I try to stay involved in my community. Well, both my parents are very committed to local organizations. They are real role models in regards to one's civic duty. I shared my mother's love of books, and as a member of the Hood River Women's Club, I was thrilled to help bring Hood River's first library. It opened in 1912 on the second floor of the E.L. Smith Building at 3rd and Oak Street. Well, within 2 days of opening, 115 library cards were issued. Well, with this apparent interest and a great deal of community support, by December of the same year, the Women's Club had secured funding for a brand new library building. $17,500 was granted by the Carnegie Library Fund, and ground was broken the following year on land donated by Mr. Smith. Well, his daughters had urged him to offer the property in honor and memory of their mother, who had done a great deal for our community, Georgiana. The library, our beautiful red brick library, was completed in 1913, and still today, it serves as a centerpiece in town, a real source of pride. Why, I take all of our out-of-town guests there to visit, sitting as it does under that grove of ancient oak trees alongside that lush green lawn. Another point of pride, at least for me, is my Harry. I have to brag just a little bit. About 5 years ago, Harry had a banner year with DeWitt Motors. He ordered 72 cars for the dealership and had cash deposits for 17 more. Why, dealers in Hood River sold 150 cars that year. Harry ended up selling the dealership the next year, in 1920. He focused his business interests on his automobile garage, you know, on Oak Street, between 2nd and 3rd. He continued to do very well. So well that we were able to build our home at 916 Cascade Street. I love our darling cottage and seeing how the neighborhood is coming along. Did I tell you I'm keeping a scrapbook? It has photographs of friends and family and all the fun times that we have together. Oh, well, this is a photo of an engagement party that I hosted for Irene Bancroft. She's there on the far left next to me. I think I was keeping my eye on a mischievous dog. Oh, a favorite pastime. Friends and family converging at my parents' summer retreat, Camp Minnehaha's. Well, it was located in the Lost Lake district of Mount Hood, at the confluence of the Lake Branch and the West Fork of the Hood Rivers. It was a great sight to escape the summer heat in town. And we'd spend the evenings entertaining each other with musical acts and skits. Me and my Hudson touring car. This is the home my father built, I think around 1907. That's my sister Catherine and her dog Rex. I think Father sold this house. It was at 9th and State Streets, and he sold it to the church across the street. It became their parsonage. You know, Harry and I actually lived next door for a few years. There were rumors of bears in the neighborhood. Funny, we never saw any. Yours truly. Not a bad backswing. Oh, and a place near and dear to my heart, our Hood River Golf Course. This is our golf professional's wife, Mrs. Rutledge, myself, Mrs. Hamilton, and our two popular Beau Brummels, Messieurs Cedarwall and Green. I'm sure Harry was there somewhere. Too bad he missed getting his photo taken. You know, I love sports. Harry and I both play singles and doubles tennis. We're on bowling teams, but we especially love golf. Did you know Hood River did not have a golf course until just last year? Why, many of us spent several winters playing on the bar, the sandbar of the Columbia. I think we were quite creative. We were making do with what we had while taking advantage of the winter conditions. Of course, the low water level would expose the bar, and then the cold temperatures created a hard, crusty surface on the sand. It was quite conducive to golf. The balls would actually roll instead of sink. Our newspaper, The Glacier, they even took notice of us, and listen to what they said. At times, the golfers, many of them women, appear from the distance of the city like fleas on the Great Bar. The golf enthusiasts are making the most of their improvised course, as it will be submerged by water as soon as the Columbia starts rising with the usual spring freshet. Well, clearly, we needed a proper golf course. And by January 1922, some of these fleas, including my Harry, formed a committee to push the idea forward. Each committee member pledged $100 and brought in a professional, George A. Jetty. Well, he had already built courses in, let's see, LeGrand and Pendleton, Corvallis, Salem, and Gerhardt. Well, the committee's main selling point, if you will, was the common expectation that with the completion of the Columbia River Highway, Hood River would become a tourist destination. Having a course would attract golfers and tourists alike, who would certainly spend their money in other local establishments. Well, through the sale of bonds, the committee purchased a 150-acre orchard from Mr. Herman Craig, about 6 miles southwest of town in the Oak Grove district. They paid $20,000 for the property. By May, investors had given $13,000, both local and Portland investors, and another $5,000 donation came from Simon Benson. Well, he had completed the Benson Hotel on the west end of town the year prior. By June of that same year, the Hood River Country Club was formally organized. Initiation fee was $25 with monthly dues of $3. The following year, June of 1923, the golf course was formally dedicated. 9 holes were complete and ready for play, and the club had added tennis courts and a swimming pond for members and their guests. I must add that the course is also especially progressive in promoting golf for women. My Harry was one of the founding members, as was Truman Butler, son of the man you will now meet. In fact, Truman serves on the executive board of the country club. But let's hear from Mr. Leslie Butler, whose bank was just opened and newly constructed at 3rd and Oak Streets. Congratulations, Mr. Butler, and welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a delight to share this celebration with so many of you. This year, 1924, is a banner year for Hood River. Why, we're on schedule to finish the construction of the interstate bridge over the Columbia River. And that will be in December, and I fully intend to hammer in the final ceremonial stake into that wooden plank there. Wooden planks. Anyway, we are also well underway planning a new Mount Hood Loop Highway. And in addition to the Columbia Gorge Highway, we will have a route that automobile travelers can travel around the south side of Mount Hood and then arrive in our fair city. When they come into our fair city, they will be able to shop at Mr. Yasui's Christmas store and play golf at our new Hood River Country Club, where my son Truman is a founding member along with his friend Harry DeWitt. As most of you know, I started the first bank in Hood River back in 1900. And again, that was a small town at that time. And at that time, we were looking at the possibility of what could happen in our town, where we could grow, and these routes that brought people into the area, we knew that travelers, tourists, others, as well as locals, would be able to boost our economy. So, back at that time, at Hood River, we decided to go ahead and develop our first bank. And then you'll have to forgive me, I was born in 1847, and if you can do the math, you will know that I am approaching 77 years of age, and if you can do that math, we might have a position for you at Butler Bank. In any event, on the 4 corners of 3rd and Oak, we have always had a home for a bank. It would be the northeast corner was Mr. Culbertson's Hood River Banking and Trust Company in 1907. And then across from them was the First National Bank on the northwest corner, 1910. But an earlier bank for them, a structure, was completed on the southeast corner of 3rd and Oak, and that was built in 1904 by my friend E.L. Smith. We now have our permanent new structure here on the banking corners of 3rd and Oak Street. I'm delighted to tell you that it is our intent that 100 years from now, the Butler Bank will continue to serve the financial needs of this community. I was born, as I said, in 1847 in the county of Randolph in Indiana. And you've already done the math. So about 60 years ago, when I was 17, we moved to Kansas, where I met and eventually married Miss Caroline Bixler Carey. And that was on November 10, 1967. And if you're still doing the arithmetic, you will know that that was my 20th birthday, and it was a very fine present. We had 6 children, 4 of whom survived into adulthood. That would be George and Truman, and Nellie and Carrie. We had 2 children, Jesse and Pearl, who died in 1898, typhoid fever. That was when I took a real interest in supporting charitable health organizations and causes. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I was not always a banker. When I was a young man, I was a grocer, a cabinet maker, a bridge builder, and in 1878, I took a position with the Leavenworth, Lawrence, and Galveston Railroad Company in Kansas, and worked there for about 3 years. But in 1880, the railroad company was taken over by the Santa Fe Railroad, and in 1881, we picked up and moved to Oregon, where I worked in the Dalles in another railroad maintenance shop. Well, after moving to the Dalles, very quickly I realized it was important to go into business for myself. And so I became a grocer. And for 12 years, we had a retail grocery. And then as the family got bigger and was growing, we sold the retail shop, closed it, and I became a wholesale grocer for another 5 years. And that is until about 1898, when I changed directions. I decided to learn the banking business, and I joined a firm, a lending firm in Portland, and there I realized very soon that it was so important for me to own my own business and to be part of a community. So we picked up the family and moved to Hood River, and Truman and I, on April 4, 1900, opened the Butler and Company Bank. I served as president for another 20 years until 1920, and then Truman took over. And that allowed me to really pay much more attention to civic causes in the area and across the state. I was one of the first members of the State Highway Advisory Board. Do we have a picture of our gentleman there? Oh yes, you can see. There was Simon Benson of the hotel, and we also had John B. Yeon, who was into landscaping across the state, and we had Samuel Lancaster, and some of you may recognize Sam Hill up there in the corner. It was important for that board, that advisory board, to really be the instrument by which we created in the state then a state highway commission, which had responsibility for developing highways and roadways across the state. In fact, the state legislature said something about the mandate was to get Oregon out of the mud. In any event, I was also a member of the Northwest Tourist Association, which I'm still a member of, and we were responsible for many of the travelers' amenities along the routes across the state, including drinking fountains. You may have seen some of those drinking fountains. They were not only important to quench the thirst of weary travelers, but to also replenish the water in radiators of overheated cars. Well, earlier on I had become involved with many health causes, and I was a member of the Association for the Prevention of Tuberculosis. And the governor appointed me to a commission whose responsibility included the establishment of a tuberculosis sanitarium in Salem. In recognition of my service, they named one of the wings the Butler Pavilion. And in addition to our bank, we are really pleased that the Butler name is recognized and remembered. But tonight, here in Hood River, we have an opportunity to meet with a man who is associated with the beautiful designs of New York City's magnificent Madison Square Garden and the Pennsylvania train station, a man who's responsible for many of the landmark buildings in downtown Portland, including the Meyer and Frank building, and finished in 1909, the Central Public Library in 1913, and the U.S. Bank building in 1916. He's also been associated with the development and design of many residences for wealthy Portlanders, some of which are right on the bluffs overlooking the Columbia River. So, without further ado, I want to introduce to you the architect of the Butler Bank and one of the most prominent and successful architects of the 20th century, my friend Albert Ernest Doyle. A.E. Doyle, come on out here and tell the people about my beautiful building.
Now, Mr. Butler, that's not quite what I said to you. My mentor, William Whidden, who designed the First National Bank right across the street from your bank, worked on those iconic New York City structures. Now, during my time in New York, I was referred by them and worked for Mr. Henry Bacon, who created one of our country's most beautiful and important monuments, the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. I feel it's important to mention that I got my start in architectural design with Whidden and Lewis when I was a teenager. Sometimes I wish I still worked for them. My job these days feels like it's killing me. Too much management, not enough real artistic design. My doctor says my blood pressure is too high and I need to refrain from alcohol and red meat, which I'm all too happy to do. But as you can imagine, the work itself does go on. Enough about all that. I'd like to say that I am very happy with the Butler Bank Building because I really got to be an artist and create something that is unique and fulfills the design aesthetics that I believe in. The Egyptian-style Butler Bank is 2 stories in height and has an interior mezzanine level. Constructed of concrete, the east and north sides are finished with sandstone from the Wilkinson Quarry near Tacoma, Washington. I am especially fond of the Doric columns that flank the recessed central entrance. Preparation for construction started in January of this year, 1924, with the demolition of the existing building on the site. The job was completed in 100 days. Plumbing and heating systems, as well as the electrical contracts, went to Hood River firms. You may have heard, it was reported in the Hood River News last May, that construction was delayed when a shipment of sandstone packed in wood shavings was badly damaged by fire near Bridal Veil Falls during transport. Well, as you can see, we stayed the course and we got the place built up by August.
It's $75,000 well spent.
As our state grows, we are developing colleges and business and retail spaces that support that expansion. We hope to bring these magnificent examples of beauty and functionality to all of the towns and cities of Oregon. Now, like Mr. Butler, I am not a native of Oregon. I was born July 27, 1877, in Santa Cruz, California. My father, a carpenter by trade, had already lived in Portland for a short while. But by 1880, he realized as people were pouring into the city that there was again plenty of work. In 1880, the population of Portland was around 17,000. By 1890, it had nearly tripled. One estimate said that over 100 or 1,200 people a month moved to Portland. Working and watching my father work inspired an interest in architecture. I got my training in the building business. It was full of tough customers who would go out on a job, spit a wad of tobacco that would split a 2-inch plank, and let loose with the proper accompanying language, which I could understand, and in fact I could use some of it in a mild manner. I was extremely lucky when in 1893, I was only 17 years old, I started an apprenticeship with Whidden and Lewis, one of the most highly regarded architectural firms in the city. I worked for them, advancing from apprentice to draftsman until 1901. They were kind enough to sponsor me in a move to New York City so that I could take the position with Henry Bacon. While working with Bacon, I attended architectural classes at Columbia University, a benefit offered to aspiring architects at the time, even those with little formal education like myself. You see, I had stopped going to school after the 8th grade so that I could join my father in the building trade. Well, in 1904, after returning to Portland, I went back to work with Whidden and Lewis. Mr. Ian Lewis had been named Director of Architecture of the 1905 Lewis and Clark Exposition. One of my first assignments was to design the exposition's forestry building, a huge rustic log cabin style structure that some people called the log Parthenon. Well, as one of the exposition's few buildings intended to be a permanent structure, it garnered enough acclaim that I figured I could start my own firm. But before doing that, I fulfilled another dream by taking a months-long exploration of Europe to visit the architectural wonders there. I'm deeply interested in classical architectural design, while at the same time being very involved in the popular arts and crafts movement of today. Well, upon my return from Europe in 1906, I married my longtime sweetheart, Lucy Godley. We have 4 children: Kathleen, Helen, Billy, and little Jean. You know, one of my first jobs alone as an architect was actually here in Hood River. The Elliott Building on the corner of 2nd and Oak, you know, the hardware store below, offices above. I drew the plans for my friend Thomas Lamb Elliott while I was in Florence, Italy, in August 27th, 1906. Tom is a dear friend who's brought much work to the firm. The Central Library and several other branch libraries in Portland, as well as one of my most important and biggest projects, the Reed College campus. My first solo projects were modest houses, but in 1908 I got my first major commission, the Meyer and Frank department store in downtown Portland. I have to say that other than some very lean years during the war, we have done quite well since. I'm especially fond of classical Greek and Roman architectural designs. I'm pretty good at drawing them. White glazed terracotta is easily molded into classical motifs. A design that I've used extensively in commercial buildings. Meyer and Frank, the Northwestern Bank Building, the Benson Hotel, the Multnomah County Central Library, and of course the U.S. National Bank on Southwest 6th Avenue in Portland, which is designed to resemble a classic Roman temple. I also love exploring fresh ideas and employing local materials with little to no ornamentation. Designs that reflect the architecture of rural Oregon. On the Oregon coast at Neocani, I have designed artist cottages, well, beach cottages for artists, businessmen, and even my own family. I have designed a number of buildings here in the Columbia River Gorge, the Children's Sisters residence near Mosier, Oregon, the Portland Auto Club located near Sandy, Oregon, the Julius L. Meyer residence, which is just east of Corbett, the Multnomah Falls Lodge, and of course the Butler Bank Building. I am a member of the Portland City Planning Commission, as well as the Chamber of Commerce, and a director of the Portland Art Museum, and I am now on the Reed College Board of Regents. These are wonderful organizations, and I'm very proud to serve, but I think the thing I am most proud of is that I've been able to meet the desires of my clients while still exploring new and emerging architectural designs. It's been a wonderful journey, and I'm so grateful that I've been able to build my life around, well, building Oregon.
In 1924, Leslie Butler and A.E. Doyle did not know what fates would bring. But, oh my, after a sudden illness, Portland's architect, A.E. Doyle, died. Less than 4 years later, on January 23rd, 1928, his legacy lives on. Though the forestry building burned down August 1964, Mr. Doyle's architecture still dominates the heart of Portland's downtown and residential districts. The Butler Bank stayed in business until 1932, closing due to the Great Depression. However, the Butlers were so well liked in Hood River, no one blamed them for the bank's failure. Leslie and Truman formed a real estate and insurance business which became very successful. Leslie was also very active in the Children's Farm Home in Corvallis, supplying them with fresh produce from the Hood River Valley. He was a member of the executive committee of the YMCA, the Oregon Hygiene Society, and Dornbecker Memorial Hospital for Children in Portland. Leslie Butler maintained his interest in his businesses until his death on January 8, 1944, at the age of 97. He is buried at the IOOF Cemetery in the Dalles. Well, Mr. Butler's friend and fellow businessman, Masuo Yasui, could not be with us tonight, but we are grateful to have his wife, Shizuyo, here. Their home and general store sit at 3rd and State Street, directly behind the new Butler Bank. Help me in welcoming Mrs. Yasui.
I was born Shitsuyo Miyake, but now I am Shitsuyo Yasui. Masuo Yasui is my husband, and my life is now in Hood River, Oregon. My husband tends to a lot of business, both his own and for others in the Japanese community. Many Issei come to him for advice and for help. Issei means first generation in a new country. All of us are Issei, but Masuo, he has learned English. He speaks for many Issei because, like me, they do not understand or speak the language here in America. It is just too different from Japanese. But Masuo, he studied very hard to learn, and now he speaks for many Issei on many matters, from doctor's visits to getting a loan from the Butler Bank to paying rent. He is a busy man. He is a hard worker. He brings honor to our family. Masuo and his brother Renichi have a store in Hood River. Yasui Brothers' store. Renichi is in charge of the front, dealing with customers. And Masuo takes care of the business finances. Now that my children are older, I help out at the store when I can, but with 6 children at home and another one coming very soon, there's always a lot to be done. And Masuo, he's always so busy. It is nice that Renichi is a good uncle to the children. Where Masuo is strict and serious, Renichi is kind and forgiving. And so funny. He is always making us laugh with his stories. I think about my life back in Japan sometimes. What it was like there for me. Like going to grammar school in my small village of Nanakaichi. Masuo and I were classmates. I always loved school. I always wanted to be a teacher. But in Japan, many girls only finish grammar school because that is seen as enough school for a girl. I told my father that I wanted to go to high school, that I wanted to be a teacher. And because of his love for me, I was granted permission. My mother and my grandmother would say, "Why does she need an education? She's just a girl." They expected me to stay home and care for my younger brother because that is what it means to be chojo, firstborn girl. To care for others, to do as you are told, to fulfill obligations to family. And that is what I did. I was very unhappy. But my father, he found a way for me to go to high school in Okayama. He was a net maker by trade, but in his heart he was a philosopher and a poet, and his love for me surpassed cultural expectations. After I finished high school, I took the teacher's exam, but I failed. I was so filled with shame. I wrote to my father to tell him I could not return to my village. But my father, he met me at a train station to tell me he was proud of me and for me to come home. And that is what I did. Back to my life being chojo. But I did not stay for long. I soon left again for more education, this time college in Tokyo. I was the first girl in my village to ever go to college. I did chores to pay for my room and board while I attended Tokyo Women's Christian College. I also converted to Christianity at that time, a decision I will always be very proud of. After I completed my studies, I took the teacher's exam again, and this time I passed. Out of my entire prefecture, I was one of only 4 students to become sensei, respected teacher. I taught tea ceremony, flower arrangement, writing, sewing. I was very happy. While I was teaching on Awaji Island, Masuo started to write me letters from America. We wrote to each other for 2 years, and then I received a special letter, a proposal. a marriage proposal. I thought about this for a long time. It would mean leaving my country, my beloved father, my life as sensei that I worked so hard for. But I was already 25, practically an old maid. In Japan, most marriages are arranged by the families. What kind of prospects would I have? Me, the daughter of a poor netmaker. And what kind of mother-in-law would I have? It would be my duty and my obligation to fulfill whatever expectations she had of me. Plus, it was romantic and exciting to think about joining a new husband in a new land for a new life. And that is what I did. A ceremony in Japan with an absent groom, a passport to America. It was fall, 1912. I was 26 years old when I boarded a steamship destined for Tacoma, Washington. I was so lonely those first few years. Masuo had a house next to the store in Hood River. All other Japanese lived in Oak Grove and Deep and Parkdale. I didn't drive. I didn't know the language. I had no neighbors to talk to. I went from being sensei, respected teacher, teaching tea ceremony and flower arrangement and poetry, to being the wife of a man who honored the traditions from Japan. Masuo is the head of the household. I am the dutiful wife. He makes all the decisions. Shikata ganai, it cannot be helped. I have no control over this. And so, I do not dwell on a life that no longer exists. Hope for me has now been transferred to my children. Kei is Chonan, firstborn son. He will take over from Masuo. He was born in our house on 3rd Street next to Yasui Brothers store, a little over a year after I arrived. Next came second son Tsuyoshi, followed by third son Minoru, then daughter Yuki, then daughter Michi, followed by son Roku, followed by son Shu. My sweet little Yuki. She is with God now. She died of influenza when she was 4 years old. I miss her every day. This will be my 8th child. 8 children in 11 years. I am not so lonely anymore. I have no time for loneliness. I oversee the household while Masuo tends to everything else. I do not question my duty to my family. I make sure the fire is started every morning, all the laundry done. I prepare all of the meals. I make and mend all the clothing. I make sure the children get to school. When I have time, I work in the store, and I work in the orchards and fields, mostly tending strawberries and asparagus. There is no time for loneliness. I make sure the children are fed, washed, in bed, and then I wait for Masuo to come home, and we have dinner together. He is always so busy. Sometimes he doesn't get home until past midnight, but I always wait. Masuo is always served first. That is our way. That is how things are done. Kodomo no tame ni. Everything that I have to give is for the sake of my children. I still love music, art, and culture, but Masuo and the children will always come first. I dream they all go to college, even the girls. I dream that they are all successful. Masuo agrees with school for the girls, and I am thankful for that. I know we are not always welcome here. Japanese will never be accepted, some say. Shikata ganai, it cannot be helped. Besides, most of the time, I am too busy to worry over such things. Except I do worry for my children, the Nisei. And so we teach them traditions from Japan, to carry out obligations to family, to work hard, always work hard, in everything, to never bring shame to the family, to always bring honor to the family. That is our way. That is how things are done. Gambate. We stay strong. We keep going. We persevere.
Most of you already know what happened to Mr. and Mrs. Yasui. The anti-Japanese sentiment of the 1920s never really went away. Even though Masuo is venerated in modern times, Mr. and Mrs. Yasui were both honored and disrespected in their time. Their oldest son, Kei, committed suicide in 1930. Perhaps due to the stress of being his father's first son, as well as a brilliant scholar and writer with his feet in two different worlds. After Pearl Harbor was bombed in 1941, prominent Japanese businessmen and community leaders like Masuo were rounded up and imprisoned. They were labeled as enemy aliens or spies. Masuo was sent to Montana, then Santa Fe, New Mexico during World War II. When some of Mr. Yasui's friends were asked to send letters of recommendation for release, only 2 men from Hood River responded positively. One was Truman Butler. Unfortunately, the negative letters from Hood River outweighed the good. All the Japanese in Hood River, more than 400 of them, including Mr. and Mrs. Yasui, were forced to liquidate their homes, farms, and businesses for pennies on the dollar, and were incarcerated in what the government called internment camps. Mr. Yasui was detained until January 1946, 5 months after Japan surrendered and the war was declared over. He joined the rest of the family in Denver, Colorado upon his release. They never regained what they once had. In 1952, at their first opportunity to do so under U.S. federal law, Masuo and Shizuyo became United States citizens. They never returned to Hood River to live, but made their home in Portland. 5 years later, in declining health, Masuo died by suicide at the age of 70, always fearful that the FBI was coming to take him to prison again. Shizuo passed away of natural causes in 1960. The second generation of Yasuis, the Nisei, built successful careers as a lawyer, 2 doctors, a teacher, public health nurse, engineer, and orchardist. The Yasui's third store was located at First and Oak Street, directly across from the Hood River Hotel Annex, whose owners are Charles and Ola Bell. And I am happy to say we have Ola with us tonight to share her memories. Welcome, Ola. You know, my maternal grandfather was a well-known hotel man in Nebraska. I think your establishment is one of the finest in the city.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's so nice to hear. We have worked hard to make our hotel comfortable. Let me introduce myself. My name is Ola Maud Stryker Bell. My parents were pioneers. They came west in 1864 by wagon train. My father was in charge of hunting game for the wagon train. I'm the second of 6 children. I was born in Brownsville, Oregon in 1866. Our father eventually went back east to study to become a doctor. He returned to Oregon and he practiced medicine in Roseburg, Drain, and finally in Portland. Our mother passed away and my father remarried, and they stayed in Portland. In 1887, I moved to Salem. My younger siblings, they were in my charge until they finished school. They moved with me. And I attended Willamette University for 2 years, taking advantage of the commercial department, which was the forerunner to the business school. And for the next 20 years, I worked in hospitality all over the Northwest. My friend Josie and I went to Gerhard, and we were the managers of the dining room at the resort. I worked at the Hotel Flavel in Astoria, and I managed the Seaside House on the Oregon coast for many seasons. In Portland, I helped open the very first cafeteria in the city of Portland at the YWCA. Meals were 15 to 30 cents a piece. I worked in Montana at a hot springs resort, and I moved back to the Gorge and worked at Collins Hot Springs on the Washington side of the Columbia. I was the manager of the dining room, and I remember once we served over 300 people for a national conference of undertakers. When I was 41 years old, I got married to Charles Bell, November 19th, 1907, at the Baptist Church in Portland. 1 month later, Charlie and I bought the Mount Hood Hotel here in Hood River. The hotel was built in 1881 by T.J. Hosford. It was the same year that the town of Hood River was platted. Mr. Hosford was aware that the railroad was going to build a depot, and he hoped that his hotel would be right next to the construction of the railroad depot. And 1 year later, the depot was completed. The hotel went through many different owners when Charlie bought it with his first wife, Roseanne, in 1893. Unfortunately, Roseanne took ill, and Charlie hired a manager, and Charlie and Roseanne moved back to Portland. And sadly, 1 year later, Roseanne died, leaving him with his son, Fred. Charlie, needing a mother for his son, remarried to Lucy, and they returned to Hood River in 1897. Tragically, she died 2 years later. In his grief, Charlie sold the hotel to Clinton Gilbert in the year 1900, and Charlie went back to working as a foreman in logging camps. Well, Hood River was having a building boom phase, and Mr. Gilbert made improvements to the hotel. The building boom phase was brought on partly by the 1905 Lewis and Clark Fair in Portland. The fair perhaps did more for the promotion of Hood River Valley as a vacation destination and a fruit-producing region than perhaps any other promotion for the popularity of the Hood River Valley, better than any other advertisements in the history of the valley. The fair lasted for 4 months, and special sightseeing trips were planned from Portland by boat and by train, and there were thousands of people who were introduced to the gorge. Mr. Gilbert passed away in 1907, and that's when Charlie and I purchased the hotel. Or I could say repurchased. It was as though all my years of hospitality experience provided me with the knowledge to run a hotel and restaurant. I am known as being very efficient and a wonderful cook. And I'm very proud to say that in our first year of operation, we profited enough to be able to pay off our $35,000 mortgage in our first year. As I mentioned, when you arrived by train, the first place you saw in Hood River was the front door of our hotel. And business was good. Sometimes we had to turn people away. Well, Mrs. DeWitt mentioned the automobiles were becoming much more common in Hood River. In 1911, there were 117 cars in Hood River. Most were brought by boat, as there was no highway from Portland to Hood River. But due to our personal association with Simon Benson, we were aware that a roads bill was on its way, and we decided to expand the hotel. The Good Roads movement was initiated the same year our annex was completed, 1912. We originally called it the Bell Building. Not only did we add tourist rooms, but first-class apartments with disappearing beds, hot and cold running water, and private baths. Columbia River Highway was completed in 1915, and on the day it opened, more than 100 cars came through Hood River in a single day. It only took 4 hours to get from Portland to Hood River. And the highway was completed to the Dalles in 1922. There's a plan for the Mount Hood Loop Highway from Hood River south to the southern side of Mount Hood. And it's being championed by our own Leslie Butler and my husband Charlie. I'd like to let you in on a little secret. Now, in 1924, we're seeing more cars come to Hood River than people come by train. So we're thinking of moving the front door and lobby to the Oak Street Highway 30 side. My Charlie, he's well known through the region for his business acumen and his generosity and civic mindedness. While he served on city council, he helped plan for some of Hood River's early amenities, street lighting and paved sidewalks and paved streets. He also helped with the Davenport brothers build the irrigation canals on the west side of the Hood River Valley. And that opened up development through the valley, as well as supplied our town with water. Together at our hotel, we provide meals to the needy and lodging to newcomers. We started the Community Christmas Charity, distributing baskets to poor families. And I often spend my evenings making quilts to help raise money for those less fortunate. We love our hotel. It is a gathering place for visitors and locals alike. We have made some fame for ourselves as a destination resort and a stopping point for those traveling to the valley. Please do come see us soon.
Sadly for Ola, Charlie died less than a year later on April 15, 1925. The lobby of the hotel was moved to the annex in 1926 with the main entrance facing Oak Street. The expectation that more hotel guests would arrive in Hood River via the Columbia River Highway didn't come to pass. The opening of the highway may have actually been bad for business. People could drive from Portland and back home via the newly completed Mount Hood Loop in one day. So there was no need for overnight accommodations. Ola was the first woman elected to the Hood River City Council in 1928 and the first woman appointed to the Hood River Port Commission in 1933. She kept the annex open and did quite well until her death, May 19, 1942. As for the hotel, the original building was demolished in 1930. By 1960, the Mount Hood Hotel Annex closed to tourists and was virtually abandoned. It was severely deteriorating when purchased nearly 30 years later in September 1988 by local developers Pasquale and Jackie Barone. The intense process of rehabilitation and the majority of the work on the building was completed in December 1989, just over 1 year later, and the hotel was renamed the Hood River Hotel. It is now a popular destination for tourists, as well as a vibrant meeting place supporting many community interests. I passed away at the age of 82 on July 4th, 1967, and was laid to rest at Idlewild Cemetery here in Hood River. Harry died 4 years later at the age of 91 and is buried next to me. While it is sad to learn that the town I remember has changed so much and places we loved are no longer here, it is heartwarming to know that Hood River is still home to community-minded people who care about this special place.